On this episode, you want the perfect paint job? Get rid of cheese and orange peel with 4 easy steps. Follow along. We're going to show you how to do it. Let's roll. What do we got?
All right, so we're getting ready to color sand and buff this beast. Can't wait for it to be driving down the street looking as good as it can be. But as you can see looking at this right now, we got a lot of orange peel. So everything shrank up on us. Even though it looked beautiful, things need to breathe. It needs to gas out. But the first initial step to what we're going to do here is we have to wipe down the panel because everything sets on it. It's been sitting around for 4 weeks. We got some dirt up there. We don't want to color sand on that because what could happen is we can create real big deep grooves that are going to be hellacious to try to get out, and we just don't want that extra work, nor do we have the time for it. So we're going to start by wiping down the panel, then drying it, and then we're going to tape off all of our sharp edges so we don't hit the sandpaper on those edges and create more problems, because if you burn through that edge, you're repainting. There's nothing that you can do about it. So we're going to take all the safety measures to make sure that that doesn't happen and try not to create any more work for ourselves.
So as Brandon mentioned, we've allowed this paint job to cure for the last 4 weeks before we even think about beginning the color sanding process. The very first step is to prepare your workstation with additional lighting, all of your sandpaper and big kid blocks, along with cleaning the panel and taping all of your edges. So let's check in with Brandon as he prepares to make the first cuts with 800 grit wet or dry paper and a 10-inch block.
It's the same concept of what you want to do when you're blocking the car with the bodywork. You know, the Bondo or the filler, whatever you're using. So you just kind of still do the same thing. You just do the cross-hatching pattern so you make sure all your areas are covered. You're covering more space so you're not just carving a groove, and you want to use a block so you don't carve a groove. Very important. Stay away from your edges. Your edges are always going to be the first thing to get kissed if you run over them, and that's going to be the lightest part on the vehicle or the panel that's going to be able to be burned through the quickest. Now, even though I'm sanding over here, my block is big enough to where I'm touching over here. So you always want to be mindful of what's going on back here while you're working up here. So you have to be 2 places at once as far as what you're visually looking at, because you don't want to put too much pressure here while you're working here after you've already sanded this panel, because you're going to burn that while you're working on that, and then it's all done for nothing. So you have to constantly be paying attention what's going on all around you at all times, because that mistake is pretty easy to make, and it's not a quick one to fix. Want to stop and wipe off your panel every once in a while, because even though you think you might be able to see what's going on between the water and the clear you're sanding off, you always get a better visual of what's going on when it's clean. This is the perfect example right here of what we're getting rid of with this 800. Miguel, point the camera right there. So you see right here we have a flat surface. There's no peel, you can't see anything. Here's a little bit of the peel right here. But if you pull back and you look at and see where all these high spots have been sanded, this is the cheese area we're eliminating. So that is something you're going to see. You didn't see it before, but you will see it later on that it's polished. So this is exactly what we're using the 800 grit to get rid of. And that's going to give you that better finish.
Eliminating orange peel is a very simple task and requires at least sanding with 1000 or 1500 grit. But to eliminate the cottage cheese that Brandon is referring to takes a different approach. This cottage cheese effect really only comes into play once you've eliminated the orange peel. So the goal here is first eliminating the orange peel, followed by eliminating the cottage cheese. The only real way that I've found to achieve this is by using acrylic blocks and 800 grit sandpaper. Once the 800 grit sandpaper has been run thoroughly down the quarter panel with a block, I'm switching gears and using a dry guide coat. This dry guide coat comes in white, obviously works well for a dark colored paint job, and we coat the entire quarter panel with this product just to help the visual sanding process. So now moving on to 1000 grit wet or dry 3M sandpaper. I'm using some water, and any remaining guide coat that remains on the panel, as you can see here, is either a scratch or a slight low in the panel. From 1000 grit, we move to 1500, and the same process with the white guide coat is used. You can see here Brandon is on 1500, giving nice, gentle sand scratch strokes, and then moving to 2000 grit. I want to make a note here that when sanding, use light pressure. Do not use force. Once we finish with a 2000 grit by hand, we're moving to a 3000 grit DA Trizac paper from 3M. 3000 grit sandpaper leaves a beautiful finish on the clear coat, which is now ready for a compound and polish.
All right, so we're getting ready to start the buffing process, which is very exhilarating. It's nice. You're right there. You're almost finished. But it's very tricky to do it. You can mess something up real quick, and you're going to pay for it no matter what every single time. If you're not paying attention, you got to respect your buffer first and foremost, because it will come back and kick you in the face or mess something up. But the buffer, the rotation, you can see is going clockwise. The buffer tells you right here. But that's very important, because when you're coming up to an edge on a panel, you don't want to buff into it. Boom, what that's going to do, it's going to kick the buffer down, and it's going to ruin something no matter what. So you always want to be cognizant of the idea of buffing off of the edge. Right there, you're going to buff off the edge. You're never going to hit that edge. You can burn it if you concentrate and focus too much in one spot, because you always want to keep this thing moving. You got to realize that it's creating friction, it's getting heat, and that's what's causing these scratches to melt away. That's exactly what you're doing. That's why we step down the sandpaper process from 800 to 3000. Is what we're doing is we're cutting those scratches down, and we're eliminating the peel and the cheese and everything like that. But in essence, what the buffing pad is doing, it's heating up the clear and slowly melting those sand scratches away, so you have that perfect finish without any distortion or anything like that in it.
Running one of these buffers on a freshly painted vehicle really puts you in almost a meditative state. You're highly focused, yet ultra relaxed. And this takes months and months to master. As my goal with these videos is to build your confidence at home, I also want you to take your time and do not rush the process. But if you're feeling up for the challenge, here's the compound that we're using. This is a ceramics polish from CSI, and your standard 3M wool pad on the buffer will do the job, followed by a polishing pad and this orbital finishing polisher.
This is more like a dual action. It spins, but it also spins, you know, like a DA. The wool pad, it just spins in one direct motion. This kind of covers all the areas and bases, so it doesn't put a fine scratch in it. It's helping take away those fine little angel hair scratches with like a little bit of a paint confusion, I guess you could call it. I don't know. But it's definitely a good tool to have in your arsenal for detailing.
So the finished product, as you can see, this quarter panel is done, and that completes the first, second, and third step of the process. With the quarter panels completed, we're now moving on to the doors. It's a simple rinse and repeat, starting with 800 grit, consecutively 1000, 1500, 2000, and finally the 3000 grit DA, followed by the compound and polish buffing process. Look at that mirror finish, gloss black. It is perfection. So we are to the point where the compound is being cleaned off of every panel of this vehicle. This finally reveals the true depth and luster of this perfect paint job. So I've gone over the 3 processes so far: the preparation, the cutting with sandpaper, and finally the polishing. And the 4th and final process is a beautiful wax job, either in a good mother's carnauba or a ceramic. I recommend consulting your local detailer to do the ceramic coat, but you can see just with a little elbow grease and years of experience, you get a luster finish just like this. Well, as always, I hope you guys learned a thing or two. Of course, this isn't every detailed step of the process, so I urge you to get out in your garage and try your hand at color sanding and polishing. And don't be afraid to make a mistake. So hey, thanks again for watching. We will see you next week. Join us every Friday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time for new drops. See you then.